Nah. Now you can go.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance, where I am your hostess, Alacias and Duncan.
And I'm your co-host, Duncan Sandlin. How are you doing today, Lace?
I'm absolutely fabulous. I think we're going to tune into some student loan forgiveness talk today, aren't we?
Absolutely. We're going to finish up. So we did last week, student loan stuff. We're going to talk a little bit more about kind of the history behind it and how it happened. And I wanted to start this with because we did get an email, a couple emails and some comments about us kind of getting on Dave Ramsey. And, we were accused of trying to get a boost from Dave Ramsey. And all I have to say about that is if Dave wanted to talk, we'd be fine with it. But I don't think Dave Ramsey would particularly care for us very much or the things we have to say. So we're not really expecting it.
No.
So, they compared us to the guy Stephen Graham. But Stephen Graham, and he has a YouTube channel, but he's a huge Dave Ramsey fan. He has a cardboard cutout, a life-size cardboard cutout of Dave Ramsey, and he's got like photos. I only watched like 10 seconds of one of his videos, and it's photos of him and his buddies hugging the Dave Ramsey cardboard cutout. I'm like, yeah, if you watched our content, you'd realize we're nothing like this, guys.
No, and I don't want to have any cardboard cutouts of anybody.
No, but I will say this, just to be fair, we have gone to a little bit of excess on the Dave Ramsey stuff. And I want to assure our audience that's going to go on for a while.
Okay.
I'm sorry. He's just such an easy target. So, yes, it's going to go on for a while. But we want to assure you it'll all be in good taste.
Okay.
At least as I define good taste. So we're going to start today with Dave Ramsey talking about some student loan stuff. And this is a continuation from a video we showed last week, but with him and Christina Ellis. But they're talking about the loan forgiveness. And just wanted to share this with you, the audience.
That I've talked to a lot.
I don't have that
around this, from the very beginning, from the
just
moment.
in this room. There's been a lot of
That being said, I've talked to a lot of people who, of course, there's people who are upset and don't think it's going to happen, but there's a lot of people who are genuinely
counting on this.
So
I'm telling you, you're going to have your hope gets screwed when you place your hope on the wrong things.
Well, how do you think people should see this moving forward? People who are still qualified for this, do you think they should be nervous that potentially they could quietly fall out of it? Or what's kind of your thought on how people should look at this?
My thought from day one has been, don't wait on them to fix your life. Because by the time if they actually do institute this, it may require an act of Congress. Many legal scholars are saying that. You can't really spend $300 billion. That's $300,000 million without Congress's approval. You can't just do that as a stroke of a pen as the president. You don't really have the constitutional right to do that. Or at least that's what some people are saying. I don't know much about it, but it sounds reasonable to me.
Real quick, you can, because the money's already been approved through the Department of Education. Congress has already approved it. They approved it back in the 60s. So, yeah, you don't need Congress's approval. The president can do this. Just FYI. So, it just kills me. It's like the guy keeps saying he's got, 1,000 employees and he's worth hundreds of millions, but nobody can look this up. And yet I can do it in 2 minutes. I don't know. Is it just me or am I insane?
Well, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive.
Oh, okay. So I might be crazy. All right.
You might be crazy and correct. I mean,
I think I'm correct and sane. So
that might be true too.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So it requires an act of Congress. And you know what? When we were kids, we used to say, well, that's going to take longer than an act of Congress. You know why we say that? Because an act of Congress takes freaking forever. Congress is slower than Christmas. They're gridlocked. They don't do half what they say they're going to do. 3/4, 90%, 98.2% of what they say they're going to do. And so, if it requires an act of Congress, you're screwed. If Biden can really do it with a stroke of a pen, it's $10,000. You have $98,000 in student loan debt. Quit acting like your life's better. Go get yourself out of debt. $10,000 ain't going to fix your life, by the way. It's going to help. And I'm not mad at you if you take it, but there's
So I
I
think,
don't understand what they're complaining about.
well, he's saying it's stupid, it's worthless, it's blah blah blah. But here's the thing: so over 20 million people who have student loan debt, this will actually wipe out their debt, and a lot of them are lower income people. A lot of them are minorities.
If that zeroes you out, that's a beautiful thing right there.
Well, and it puts them in a position now where, too, with the other parts of the plan, we're going to throw more money at schools and make it more feasible, and we're going to cap the tuition increase rates, and the government will pay to subsidize the interest on student loans as long as you're making your minimum payments, that kind of stuff. Now it makes it possible for a lot of these people who couldn't finish school because they couldn't afford it. It makes it more reasonable for them to be able to do so. So this idea that, well, $10,000 isn't going to change your life, for about 15 to 20 million people, it is. They're $10,000 if you're lower income is a life changer.
I know a certain point in time in my life when I was making about $25,000 a year, a $10,000 swing in a particular direction would hugely change my life. If it was $10,000 more of income, $10,000 less of debt,
mm-hmm.
It would make a huge difference.
Right, but Dave doesn't care. If you're poor, he doesn't care. That's essentially what he's getting to here, right? And that's what just I think is so fatuous about the guy. It's just he doesn't give a shit. But anyway, we'll get into more of his genius.
So many indications here that this is so much about the midterms, so much about optics and posturing, and so much about politics more so than actual financial planning. So
it's going to be an interesting few months, I think.
Yeah, 30 days from now.
Yeah,
we're 30 days out from the midterms.
Well, they said that the application should be out any time now, so very telling.
That would be interesting. Yeah. See if it comes out before the midterms. If you actually have an application in your hands, a place to sign up on a website that they've actually programmed. So how are you going to prove $125,000 income limit in a year that's not closed?
Well, see, that's a good question. So Dave asked this question on August 4th. Can they get the thing out before the midterms? I don't know. I mean, Lacey, do you think they could get it out before the midterms? Do you think that's possible?
Well, I think with the invention of the internet, plenty is possible.
Yeah, but it's all political, Lacey. Biden doesn't really mean it. Honestly, it's not going to really help anybody. It's all pointless. They're not going to do it. I mean, we're just Dave's right. It's all wrong. Okay, we'll start here.
Well, there is some good news this morning. If you have an outstanding student loan, you can now apply for relief from that debt. The U.S. Department of Education launched a beta test of its student loan forgiveness website on Friday. Applications will be processed when the site officially launches later this month. President Biden's student debt relief plan will provide up to $10,000 in debt cancellation for borrowers who earn less than $125,000 a year.
Well,
seems like there's an application out.
So I guess Dave was wrong about that one. You know what else he was wrong about? They opened it this last weekend, and 8 million people over the weekend already filed. Of the 44 million that could do it. So they've got a fifth already signed up and ready to go. So, yep. So Dave was wrong. And horrible. So it's par for the course for Dave.
Well, what I don't understand is why at a certain point people can't admit that it happened. It's not even personal. It's not personal. It doesn't have anything to do with them. It happened. It's happening. It's out there.
Well, the other thing about it is you can sit there and say, yeah, it's political. And it is, to a degree. Biden wants to, pump things up for the midterms. It's, every president does it. Trump did it with the caravan thing. Obama's done it. I mean, they all do it. This is not new. We vote for them because of this, right? It's the whole, like, if I hire a guy and he does a really good job, I'm not going to go there and yell at him and go, well, you only did a good job because I'm paying you and you want to keep your job. Yeah, that's why I did a good job. It's like, oh, we elected the politician because he promised to do this and then he did it. Well, he's just doing it for politics. Yeah, because he wants to get reelected. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's how power works. It's just how it goes. I just think it's funny, and then you have Christina Ellis, who's supposed to be the college loan expert, well, she's against college loans, but the college, you don't have to get loans to go to college.
Or the scholarship, like the go on scholarships, no debt college expert.
Yeah, but she has nothing to say about this. I mean, she didn't have anything to add. I mean, it's just amazing to me. She got nothing to say.
What's, I guess, in my opinion, problematic sometimes about this show is that there's not variation in opinion per se, which I guess arguably makes them incredibly consistent. But at the same time, it would be interesting to hear some different takes and some,
right,
some actual debate, some different perspectives on something, but the perspectives all very shared.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the difference. I mean, because we disagree on things. We'll, we argue about things, not like heated or anything, but we just, we argue about them.
We just have different takes on things,
Yeah, we have different takes on a lot of things, but that's the whole point, right? The whole point is not to have one opinion, right? But with Dave Ramsey, it's all kind of couched in this sort of evangelical, religious. There's only one answer. There cannot be any sort of divergent, philosophy or sense, right? Which is kind of the difference between what we're trying to do here versus what he does and what others do, which is they all have to be kind of in lockstep, which is part of the problem with the financial industry, which is this is the way it is and nobody questions it.
Right.
But that is what it is. So
you should question it.
Well,
you should question it.
Yeah. And, it's just historically it's been like that. Speaking of history, horrible segue. So student loans, let's real quick talk about the history. Did you want to start or do you want me to go?
No, you can go for it.
Okay. So I think it was 77, maybe 78. I should have taken better notes on that. No, not 77. It would have been 1957. So we're in the middle of the Cold War. It's kind of just started, right, in the United States. Between the United States and the Soviet Union, right, the USSR. Well, the Soviet Union developed what was called Sputnik. And if you guys don't know what it is, it's the first human-made satellite to orbit the Earth. And it's basically a round metal ball with little antennas pointing out of it. It didn't do a ton, but it was pretty impressive to put something in orbit back then. And you could pretty much see it from the night sky when it orbited the Earth with a small telescope or binoculars. And so as it orbited over the United States, Americans were freaking out, right? Because now the Russians could put something in our airspace that we couldn't do anything about. We had no technology, no ability to do anything about this. So Eisenhower was president, Ike. And so Ike got the Defense Council together and said, well, we got to do something because we're falling behind, right, in the Cold War. And basically his Defense Council said, well, the problem is we just don't have enough educated people to do anything. So they developed what's called the NDEA. It's the National Defense Education, I forget, administrator. I can't remember what the last letter stands for. But what's important is that's where the first, there were student loan kind of things before, but this was the first big federal government program. And so what they did was they put that together, and it was mostly for science, engineering, physics, things like that. By 1965, though, 7 years later, after 58, when they put it together, it had become so popular that what they did was they just applied it to all the academics. So humanities, arts, everything. And that's where you got the real first kind of student loans. And there's a lot of things that happened with that, but we can get into that later. Well, this all changed in the 80s when Ronald Reagan became president. And you had sort of the neocons come into power. And initially the argument was, well, we don't want too many people going to college, because then who are we going to get to do the lower jobs, right? Because if they go to college, they're going to not want to do that, or they're going to ask for more money, and then that's going to destroy the economy. So the idea is we don't want too many educated people. We just want enough educated people. And that was the sort of conservative mindset at the time. And just to sort of, there were a lot of other factors in that had to deal with not just class, but race and other things. And to deal with that, I'm going to give you an example here. So this is, all right. So here's Anna Kasparian. She works for the Young Turks. She's going to do a bit about this, and then play a clip from Robert Reich, who did a documentary about student loans. And that was not helpful. All right.
Used to invest far more in public colleges to make them affordable for people. It's because it actually benefited the country. For every dollar that was invested in funding public higher education, the country got $7 back. Okay? Because these are people who get the education, they go out there, and what do? They become productive members of society, they innovate, they're creators. I mean, there was a reason why FDR focused on that. And there's a reason why, there were budget cuts when it came to funding public colleges, community colleges, which used to be free at one point in this country. And at one point, after not being free anymore, they were at least affordable. Now, not so much. And there's a very real reason for that. Robert Reich put together a pretty great video. It's a little old, but I thought that it was telling. Like, what sparked austerity associated with higher education in this country? Let's watch.
You start out in 1954 by saying, by 1968, you can't say that hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than white. We want to cut this, and it's much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than
And as we've scared whites about integrated public education, we've built support for politics that says cut public funding to public schools, to public colleges, and indeed to just about everything public.
Over the course of one generation, states have cut about a quarter out of every dollar they used to spend on funding public college. What's made up the difference? A tripling of tuition and an average of almost $30,000 in student debt.
So in the beginning of that...
So, just to go through real quick, there was a concerted effort in the 80s from the conservatives, from the Republicans, to cut student loans, which was a complete altered course from the 70s, where they were trying to make colleges like free, or at least extremely cheap. And part of that was racial, part of that was classist. But that's essentially what led to the problem we have today, which is why student loans are so much more detrimental today than they used to be. And so when people make the argument of, well, it's probably not worth going to college because of the cost, the question you should be asking versus what you shouldn't be asking is, well, should I just do something else versus why is college so much more expensive? And the reason why it's so much more expensive is because they don't want you to go. They want you to go do something else. Because they don't want you to actually get an education. They want you to just do some job. And if that's what you want to do, that's cool. That's great. But if you want to go to college and want to do those things, you shouldn't be in a position where you're sitting there going, well, God, I have to go into debilitating debt just to get an education that may or may not pay off. Or I just have to give up on my dreams. Because that's essentially the option that was created by cutting funding to colleges. Do you have any addition to that? Or?
I feel like you hit all of it. Really, that so much of it is, systematically trying to keep people in certain places, socially, economically, keeping people in certain lots in life. And, we talk about giving people opportunities to, move from one position in life to another, but actually stack the cards completely against them in terms of the practical application of being able to do that. And that's exactly what you're speaking to here.
Right. You hand me a fixed deck and then you wonder why I can't win. And
it's funny though, the narrative built around it still is that you definitely can raise up out of this, and this is the way. But when you sort of look at the fine print, so to speak, you look at what this path really is, and you realize that it's stacked for some people and against others.
Right. And, part of our whole position here, or at least my position, I'm sure yours too, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is, the system is what it is. You can't change it right this second. You can be active, you can vote and do things, and, be active in your community and work in politics or whatever it is, work with nonprofits, whatever. But the bottom line is it is what it is now. So let's talk about, if the deck is fixed, the first thing you need to do is realize the deck is fixed. Because if you're going to sit there and say to yourself, well, it's mostly just because I'm not trying hard enough. Well, maybe you are. Maybe you're trying too hard. Right? Because the bottom line is, I can tell you right now, just since we're going to, it's gossip finance. My parents helped me out with college. They couldn't help me out a ton. They weren't rich. They were first generation to go to college. But they did help me out financially when they could. That was a lot more than other people I knew. I had friends whose parents paid for their college. If my parents could have paid for my college, they would have. There are people that get out of college and mom and dad get them that 6-figure job right out of the gate. Didn't happen for me. My parents didn't have that kind of wealth or connections, but it does happen. And I don't have a problem with those people. There's nothing wrong with that. But to sit there and say to people that didn't have any of those advantages, well, the problem is you just don't, it's a character issue. You're not trying hard enough. You're not doing well enough. That's disgusting to me, because it's not true. Because it's simply not true. Sometimes
when you jump into, the finances of success in college, and you even think about internships, how important internships are in certain areas, maybe some more so than others, but who are the people who can afford to take these unpaid or barely paid internships? Well, primarily it's the people whose families were able to foot the bill for college, who don't have to work so much on top of it, right?
Right.
Because people in less advantaged socioeconomic classes don't have the luxury of being able to work that many hours per week for free or virtually free, because it's not on the table even for them. It's not even an option,
Right.
because they have to make a certain level of income in order to keep themselves in college. So again, even at the college level, you're separating people based on a socioeconomic background more so than actually evening the playing field, while the narrative remains that you're evening the playing field. But within it, things are not equitable necessarily.
No, not at all. Not at all. But let's, since we've already nailed the coffin shut, let's now light it on fire real quick. So, oh yeah, you're gonna love this.
What we got?
Let's see if I have it. Oh, come on. What's going on here? Oh, here we go. So this is, and I just took University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the tuition and fees, just tuition and fees. This doesn't cover books, supplies, housing, food, anything else, just tuition and fees. And it goes from 1982-83 academic year to the 2018-2019 academic year. Okay? It's not quite 30 years. Okay? So if you graduated from college in 1982, your tuition and fees were $289 per year. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you graduated in 2018-2019, your tuition and fees were $6,500 per year. Right?
Right.
So let's go into, what does that look like? So if you had, hang on one second, let me graph that up a little bit. So this is University of Tennessee. So $243 a year. Did I do that right? I think I did this by a different factor, but close enough. So if your cost was $243 a year, right? Your total cost for a 4-year education would have been $972. Okay?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
If you factor in inflation, just inflation, right? In today's dollars, you'd have paid $962 a year, and your total cost of college would have been $3,848, right? That's if we'd have just factored in inflation and nothing else. But what's happened is because they cut so much out of college, they had to increase the tuition and the fees so much, and it kept expanding and expanding. It's changed. So it now costs this $6,503 a year, right, over here, which means your total cost for college, just for tuition and fees, would have been $26,000, right? And if we would have compared that to what it would have been in 1982, instead of $243, you should have been paying $1,642, if you even wanted to be equivalent to what the average student today is paying, or what the students today are paying, sorry. And your total cost would have been $6,569 as opposed to $972, which means even factoring in inflation, the cost of college has increased at the University of Tennessee for sure, but just overall about 675%. So it's almost 7 times more expensive to go to school than it was in 1982.
I guess the magic question becomes, what about the wages?
Oh, look at you, reading my mind. So I just factored in minimum wage here, not average wage, which would probably make it worse. But minimum wage in 1982 was $3.35 an hour. That's federal, right? If you worked full time, you'd have made $6,700 a year. Well, $972, right? Going back to the previous slide, $972 total is not that much. $243 out of $6,700 is nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could have worked full-time at McDonald's and easily paid for your college and still been able to live. Wouldn't have been a big deal. And if that were equivalent to today's dollars, you'd be making $13.32 an hour. Just inflation. I'm not factoring in anything else but inflation. But so full-time, you'd be making 26, right? But inflation has only risen to 7.25 federally. So a full-time person working at minimum wage would only be making $14,500. The equivalent in 1982 of what a person today is making would be $1.82 an hour, or $3,648 a year. So half, right?
Right.
So it's a 45% decrease in the minimum wage, which means the total swing for college for a minimum wage worker from somebody from 1982 to somebody in 2019, not even 30 years later, means that person has got a financial swing of 1,227% increased cost just to go to school.
Yeah, it just makes the gap that much bigger.
It's horrific.
Yeah.
It makes it almost impossible, right? So how do you go to school, right? So the idea that these people are like, well, it's, just you can just work or get scholarships or something. It's like, no. You don't understand how much the cost has risen. It's risen to a point where it's intolerable.
Right.
And that's
It's
by
not sustainable. It's not a sustainable system, period.
right. And we just watched that clip from Anna Kasparian with Lee Atwater, who was the chief Reagan strategist, the N-word guy. And that was his thing. Let's cut this, we'll cut this, we'll cut this. And the thing is it hurts minorities more than it hurts white people. But it also hurts a lot of white people. And in fact, if you're talking about total numbers, it hurts more white people than it hurts minorities. If you're talking about percentages, it hurts minorities worse.
Right.
But if you're talking about total numbers, because there's more white people in this country, they're like half the country, then it hurts a lot of poor white people. But they don't care. As long as they keep things to where they want them. They don't want too many educated people mucking up the system.
Essentially, they're maintaining an economic divide.
Right, so they can maintain power. And and so that's just to give you sort of the history of how that happened and why it happened and what happened. Lacey and I are millennials. We're elder millennials now. Gosh, but it's frustrating for us because when the Twin Towers fell when we were in college, and we were there during the 2001 recession, the 2003 recession, the 2008 recession. We were there during the COVID recession and all that. We were there. I mean, our whole adult lives, we've been at war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Running from one disaster to another.
The job market was never good. In the 20 years we've been adults. So, I think it's getting better now. And I think the kids coming out of college now are seeing more job growth and stuff. And part of that's because COVID's changed things and wages are going up. But the bottom line is the college thing needed to be fixed. And I'm happy Biden's done something. I'm not thrilled with everything he's done. I think he should have done a lot more, but it's something, and I'll take it. But just to get into just sort of the hypocrisy of the people that are dunking on this, or kind of dunking is probably the wrong word, but sort of spitting on this. Let's go back to Dave. I told you I told you, you guys were like, gosh, you guys are excessive. Why are you guys dunking on Dave all the time? I'm like, because it's easy. It's so super easy and fun.
No, we're happy for you. We're glad you got
We want
released.
you out of debt as quickly as
We want
possible.
you to get out of debt, and we're happy for you as individuals. We're also simultaneously angry on behalf of the people who paid off their loans and feel screwed. And you know why they feel screwed? Is because they got screwed. That's why they feel screwed.
So
that's his advice.
it's his opinion.
Angry.
I'm happy. I'm Lacey.
On behalf. Wait for it. They're angry on behalf of the people who paid off their student loan debt. Now, while this won't be all of them, but many of them were doing this based on his advice.
You know, a lot of them.
While people were waiting, kind of trying to figure out if this was gonna happen, not gonna happen, and I understand we can't wait for things we're not too sure about, but there were some strategies people could have been using, stacking up money, being ready to pay that thing off, waiting to see what happened. But the advice that Dave has given people is to absolutely follow through with paying it off. And I'm on team pay debt off for sure, but now he's on, I'm mad for those of you who paid off the debt, when the reality is he's the one who's telling them to pay off the debt.
So what you're telling me is he's wrong, but he can't admit that he's wrong.
Well, it's like magically just sort of forgetting that was his particular advice. Like he's just like sort of removed himself from the equation there.
Right. So if I just...
And I have to tell you, I'm a huge advocate of getting the debt out of your life. And right now there's been this, zero on interest, which is beautiful.
Mhm.
So I don't know. My thinking has been stack that cash up, and once it gets near the end of that 0% interest situation, see where the cards have fallen, and maybe you just throw a bunch of money at it then,
Well, sure.
You still got to balance it. This stuff is all coming through.
Well, sure. But the bottom line is sometimes things happen that you can't predict.
Yes, plenty. True.
Like, in all fairness, I honestly did not think Biden would come through on student debt relief.
Really?
Even when I voted for him, I was like, nope, he's not going to do it. Well, because Biden's from Delaware, the credit capital of the United States. Most of his donors are credit card companies. I did not think Biden would sit there and go debt relief. I did not think he would do it.
Interesting. I always sort of thought that he would. Now, my thoughts and concerns were not that he wouldn't do it. I was just thinking he might kick the can down the road and kick it down the road and kick it down the road.
Well, go ahead.
Depending on the way you want to look at it, I mean, to a degree, he kind of really did keep kicking it down the road.
Yeah, for about 2 years.
Yeah. But I thought that we probably wait even longer for it, to be honest with you. But I thought that he would inevitably end up doing it.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain degree, I kind of was feeling like he got painted into a corner with it a little bit. Like there was so much surrounding him on that and the campaign promise part, and everyone from his own party,
Well, on
so hard.
On a political argument, I would say, look, because at the beginning of the year, right, early in the year, the first quarter of the year, his popularity rating was lower than Trump's. He was the least popular president in history. Right? Trump was the least, and then Biden actually somehow went lower coming out of COVID. And, the job market was doing better, but there was kind of a little bit of a dip, and there was a supply issue and inflation and all that stuff he can't totally control. There are little things he can do about it, but yeah. And then the what happened? The abortion case came through, and the Democrats didn't really do much right away. And then it got really bad, and you start every day you're reading about all these women who go through horrible things, right? Which is inevitable when you make abortion illegal. And so that started to kick up, and then he got the Inflation Reduction Act pushed, and then he's doing this, and now all of a sudden he's starting to get some strength and popularity. I think part of this is his wife, Jill Biden. She's worked in higher ed for a long time, and I think she pushed him really hard on this. And I also think he thought, okay, well, we'll try 10 and the 20 thing. We'll do this, right? And this is what his lawyers recommended. And he's like, and we'll see what happens. But the thing about it is if this plays really well in the midterms, I could imagine that 2 years from now, when he's going to the presidential election, they're like, round 2. Re-elect me.
I hadn't thought of that, but they do tend to come back and have round 2 of all sorts of kinds of stimulus. So
yeah,
so they do with this one.
Yeah, so I could see that sort of happening. But I personally didn't think he'd do it. I honestly didn't initially, but he did, and so it's working out. So we'll hopefully it keeps going well. But let's finish up with Dave's stuff here.
Screwed. And we're also angry that this is an obvious political ploy when this presidency, from an economic standpoint, is the greatest failure since Jimmy Carter. We have the highest inflation. The gas pump will make you puke. You fill up your buggy at the grocery store to make you puke. Your interest rates on your homes are up. The housing market has slowed down. We're in a
Sorry, FYI, children. The president doesn't control that. Doesn't control gas prices or housing prices.
Really?
And this is the guy earlier saying, well, he can't approve $380 billion because he has to go through Congress. But he controls the gas prices and he controls housing prices. I don't know where this guy's getting his shit from. He lives in some realm that I'm not aware of. I'm sure there's fairies there. And they tell him things. I don't know.
a recession. We were the last 2 quarters we were in a recession, or we may be recovering from a light recession. It's not much of a recession, but it's a recession, which, by God, the economy is not prospering. Oh, and they just passed the largest spending bill in history to add to this. And this move of the stroke of a pen of $10,000 for...
I want to qualify this. The largest, it was the largest spending bill in history, if you don't factor in inflation.
All right.
Yeah, because they spent more than they spent in World War II. Yeah, but if you factor in inflation, they spent about a 20th, or not a 20th, like a 6th or 7th, like less than 20%. It's also the same thing with here's a guy who was against the COVID, people staying home for COVID. No, we should have just kept working, right? 1.06 million Americans have died from COVID since it happened, COVID-19, right? That's more than every American soldier we've lost, including the Revolutionary War. We've lost more people from COVID than we've lost soldiers in war in the entire history of this country. So this, oh God, it's the biggest spending bill. Yeah, it's a different time. Welcome to the future. Get the net, bro. Sorry for the rant there.
Dave has his rants. Duncan has his.
Yeah, my rants are don't be a douchebag. And I'm not editing that out. I'm keeping that in.
All right, keep that in.
Forgiveness amounts to about 300 billion with a B more debt. So you people listening just paid off all these other people's student loan debt and your grandkids.
That's 300 billion over 10 years. So, yeah.
Paid off. And so while we are happy for you individuals, and we are, this slide toward socialism with this extreme left wing nuts it's out of control. It's completely out of control. This is a failed presidency. the Democrats are going to have a bloodbath at the midterms. They're going to get thrown out like no other party's ever been thrown out. And you can go ahead and mark that word down. And if I'm wrong, I'll come back and say I was wrong like I did a minute ago.
All right, so he is wrong. Because right now it looks like the Democrats are going to win the Senate. They might lose the House, but they're going to keep the Senate. In fact, they might get a majority in the Senate, which will really mess with Dave. Because that'll give them a lot of affluence and power. The other thing about this is the $320 billion he's talking about. It's actually $329 billion, and that was the estimate that Wharton did. If everybody got 10,000 that was eligible, right? It's probably higher because they're doing 20,000 for Pell Grant recipients, so probably closer to 5, maybe 6. But let's just go with 329. So 330 billion. The amazing thing is Duncan has a master's degree in finance, so he can do simple math. So 329 billion over 10 years, if you take, 329, you divide the 10, that's 32.9 billion. I did the math. I have a calculator. So 32.9 billion a year. How much is that in tax revenue? That's 0.85%, so less than 1% of total tax revenue. So not really a big deal. Then they're going to say, well, that means it's going to cost the average taxpayer $2,085 and like 30 cents, 29 cents, whatever it is. Yeah, over 10 years. So in 1 year, it's going to cost you $208.53, right? Except for if you're in the bottom 50% of taxpayers, like a lot of us are, who make less than whatever, $250,000 a year, right? We're in those bottom percent. Well, we pay a lot less than taxes total. I mean, we pay more percentage-wise than the top, but we pay a lot less dollar-wise. Why? Because they have a lot more money than we do. So 1% of their money is worth probably 100 times what a lot of your money's worth total, right? So what it really would cost the average taxpayer is probably closer to something like $23 a year, except for the fact that the government isn't using just tax dollars on that. The government's also funding it with debt and other things. And the amazing thing is your taxes are not going to go up at all because of this. So it doesn't affect you directly in any way, shape, or form. So
why do they seem to want to tell us that it is?
Well, there's a funny thing, and we'll actually go through this later on a different stream, but I'll point this out. So they're coming after your tax dollars, or your tax dollars, are being spent, right? This actually comes from, in the United States at least, I don't know where anywhere else, but in the United States, it comes from the post-Civil War era. And what happened is the slaves are now free, right? But they have to get jobs because they have to eat, right? They have to be able to have homes and stuff, right? And now the Union, or the Confederacy, is now under the entire Union. So the Union had public schools. So the Confederacy now has to have, they're not the Confederacy anymore, they're the southern part of the Union. They're required to have public schools, which means all these kids have to go to school. Whether your father was a slave or your father was a plantation owner, you're entitled to go to school. Well, but that's expensive. You got to have buildings and teachers and lunches and all that stuff, right? Well, you, Mr. White person, your money, your tax dollars are going to pay for those black kids to go to school. Because their parents don't have any money. Their parents aren't paying that much in tax, if anything, because they're just got freed from slavery. So you're paying for all these black kids, right? That's unfair. That is so. Why are you having to pay for that? They're using your tax dollars And that's how the Confederates who lost, right, the plantation owner guys, the guys in power, that's how they got to connect and use racism to connect the vote. To get the white people to vote against their own interests because they don't want to give their tax dollars to the black people. When in fact, their tax dollars were not going to pay for the black people. A lot of those were federally done. So it was all bullshit. It's all a lie. So this whole thing where he's like, "Oh, well, your tax dollars and you're funding these rich people and all." What rich people are making over 100 or making less than $125,000 a year? What are you talking about, man? It's ridiculous. Your tax dollars aren't going to shit, dude. The government can print money. So let me give you an example. When they did the Trump tax plan, which was actually Paul Ryan's whole spiel, right? 90%, like 80 or 90% of the benefits from those tax cuts went to the rich, who are not going to end up paying, or going to end up paying a lot less taxes, right? And to do that, what they did was they slowly raised taxes on the bottom 50%, you, me, everybody else, to cover that, to offset the losses from what the rich were no longer paying. Dave was all in favor of that. Of course he is. He's worth $200 million a year. He's getting a big tax cut. Does he give a shit if the poor people of Tennessee are paying it? What about when the market crashed in 2019 because of COVID, and Trump approved the Treasury to give $1 trillion, pump $1 trillion into the market to stop the crash, the market crash? It was over $1 trillion. Nobody said anything. Dave didn't say anything. But you, average American with some student loan debt, you're getting $10,000, and man, we're angry. It's not fair. It's, it's a horrible thing. It's all political. What a he's a special guy.
Yeah.
Help me out, Liz.
I don't know. I don't know if I have anything to add there.
Well, let me throw this in. So, I want you to understand, too, about how student loans work. A lot of your student loans are not owned by the federal government. What they're owned by are individual banks, and the federal government insures the money, which means the bank is loaning you the money and the government's insuring it. So your tax dollars aren't really at risk. But what happens is the banks then take that, because it's federally insured, and then they sell it. So the banks are making money hand over fist. So there is a huge interest, if I'm a bank and I'm selling student loan securities packages, because I make a ton of, this is the same shit that happened with CDOs and the housing crisis that almost bankrupted the world. And this is a $1.6 trillion debt in the United States from student loans. So there is a huge interest in banks to let's maximize the amount of student loans and put as much people under as much crippling debt as possible so that I can keep repackaging and selling the shit to make money. So the idea that we're going to forgive some of this and the government's going to cover it, the bottom line is we shouldn't have been under it in the first place. $10,000, that's not even the least you can do. That is less than the least you can do. It's a start, but it's nothing. It doesn't solve the problem.
Debt relief happens for people all the time. It's called a bankruptcy. People go bankrupt and have debt from all sorts of craziness just wiped away.
Yeah, Dave Ramsey went through a bankruptcy.
Yeah, and he got more than $10,000 wiped off of his slate.
I think it was like $380,000, and that was in 87 or 88, something like that. So in today's dollars, that's a lot more money.
Right.
And his creditors did get made whole. So.
We're operating within a system that allows people to wipe that sort of debt away, right, wrong, or otherwise. I don't know if we're going to allow that. I don't know why we're going to judge negatively or heavily a student loan forgiveness that happens across the board to everybody making under a certain dollar amount. And
well, and I would even say we can get rid of the dollar amount. I don't even care how much a person makes. The point is you shouldn't have been you shouldn't have been saddled with that amount of debt in the first place, just to get an education. Because the bottom line is, an education, as Anna Kasparian, we saw in the Young Turks bit, she points out, your education actually economically profits the entire country. Which goes back to the whole Eisenhower thing. Sorry, Ike. We're not as smart as the Russians because we don't have as many educated people. Having an educated populace is an investment, and it's an investment the government should make. And especially for the most powerful country in the world. I remember this with Mitt Romney when he ran against Obama. And he had that big gaffe about we need more battleships. And Obama made the joke about, well, we don't need more battleships. I mean, we don't need bayonets either. It's the 21st century, right? And Romney went and talked to all these admirals and generals, and they did a little media campaign thing. And I remember he's talking to him, and they were telling him, and he's asking, well, our fleet's so small. And they're like, well, it doesn't matter, because one U.S. aircraft carrier today could wipe out our entire fleet like 10 years ago. And this was back in 2012, right? We have like laser railgun, particle gun shit on aircraft carriers now. I mean, technology that is just immense. Their whole thing was, our problem is we don't have enough kids that can pass the basic exam to get into the military. We have all the weapons in the world. What we don't have is people that can fire them. Because it's not about just pulling a trigger anymore. It's about, you have to have computer experience. You have to have engineering technology. You have to have, there's a lot of other skills. Right? And so this idea that if you like, we're spending too much money on education. Well, the military wants us to spend more money on education. Because what are they? They're going to get a bunch of soldiers who don't know how to use the weapons? Well, that's great. That'll be a fun war. It'd be a drone war where the drones never take off because nobody can figure out how to restart them. I mean, honestly, that's the problem. Is it's all changed, and these ideas, especially about fairness, about, well, this person gets it, that person gets it, right? It's always the rich guys who are bitching about, well, poor people are getting something, right? Which is going to bring me to our last clip. And that was not a horrible segue. That was a decent segue, by the way. I just want to... Here's the Majority Report with Sam Cedar and Emma Vigilant. And you know who Sean Hannity is, right? Oh, he's a Fox News anchor. And just a wonderful human being. Wonderful guy. So he made a comment about his employees getting this student loan benefit, and how he thought it was wrong that they get the benefit. And then and this is him walking it back, and this is them commenting on it because it's, and I wanted to add their comment to it because it's just hilarious. So.
And the quote was, "We have a lot of young people that work on my TV show."
Right.
And the quote was, "We have a lot of young people that work on my TV show. They're not making $125,000, which is the cutoff for receiving this relief. They're now eligible to get, in some cases, up to $20,000, and in other cases, $10,000. This is new Green Deal radical socialism."
So Hannity got a lot of pushback. He makes $45 million a year.
He doesn't pay his producers six figures. I mean, okay.
Well, and his producers, that $45 million is what he gets from his TV show and his radio. Because he
That's a
also
good
is a
question.
slumlord too, as far as I know. Like he bought a lot of distressed properties, and it's got,
25 is from Fox News.
Okay, well God knows how many he makes with all his endorsements and whatnot. But so here he is having to backtrack a little bit, but his producers, I wonder how they joke about this in the office. But look at this exchange.
I don't know if you noticed the media mistook some words that I said about this. I was talking about myself and how when I got out of, when I ran out of money and I got out of college because I didn't have any money to continue, that I still had to pay off my debt at a time where I was living paycheck to paycheck. And I ended up writing a check, $58.05 every month to Jamaica Savings Bank. And I paid off my loan, and it wasn't easy to do. This basically, if you have a $125,000 income level limit, there's nobody that gets out of school that is, unless you went to law school or you have some very specific skill, is going to make that kind of money. And so everybody starts out, but they also cap it at 5% of what your income is, which is pretty low for somebody starting out. Although I would advise people to get rid of their debt as quickly as they can. That's just my own humble advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Do what your own financial advisors tell you to do.
So what was the problem?
Pause it for 1 second. I mean, first of all, I like it. He's meandering here. First of all, if he's going to cite his own loan, I want to know what the amount was. I want to know what the interest was. He's paying $58 a month for 2 years.
And that's where I want to go ahead and stop it with it, because I don't want to steal too much from Sam. But $58 a month. Hey, Lacey, you ever pay $58 a month for your student loan?
Oh, I wish. No,
Come on, and it's hard. It's hard. $58 a month is hard, Lace. Hard. It's hard. He said it was hard. And his employees, like they said, he's making $45 million a year, and his employees, they're not making over 125. I want to ask his employees, why are you still working for him?
so they can make their student loan payments.
Well, it's like maybe we can go through this clip later on. I saw a clip it was an interview with Chris Hogan, who used to work for him, who actually did the millionaire study, Dave's millionaire study. Chris Hogan did it. He doesn't get any credit for it anymore, but his wife was on there, and she was talking about, well, Dave didn't pay us hardly anything when we were working for him. I mean, it's just that sinister and greedy. You just have to suck up and hope that one day you'll get some of the spill off or something. I don't know. But I wanted to go back to that because this was the example I used a little bit earlier, was the University of Tennessee. And I did that because, do you know who went to the University of Tennessee, Lacey?
Well, could it be none other than Mr. Dave Ramsey?
That's right. And when did Dave Ramsey graduate? In 1982. So my overly generous example here of the cost relative to a person today was Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey went in 1982, and he's going to bitch about people getting a $10,000 break. When compared to them, he got a much, much bigger break. It was so much easier for him.
And he's had debt forgiven.
Yet he's angry that somebody else got debt forgiveness. The guy had much cheaper, much easier, much more affordable. He was able to claim bankruptcy, be given debt to whatever the tune was, almost $380,000. And I don't know, man. It He's just an interesting guy. I don't know what to tell you.
I know he's your favorite.
Oh no, yeah, no, he's great. No, I mean it's just amazing to me. It's like, he's sitting there and I'm angry about this. I'm dogging on this. F the president. Blah blah blah. Which is fine. If you're an American, you should never be happy with your elected leaders. That's the whole point of a democracy. Dude, if you're an elected leader and you expect to be loved in a democracy, you're in the wrong job. Elected leaders should be hated. It's just how it goes. Nobody's. I don't know what to say other than that. It's just, if you're an elected leader in any sort of republic or democratic sort of union, the idea is that you're a civil servant, and we should always be a little bit ticked off at you. And, you're just going to have to deal with it, because the bottom line is you can't give us everything we want, but we should always be yelling at you about why aren't you giving us everything we want? Because that's kind of the whole premise, right? And if you're going to sit there and go, well, they're just being unreasonable and blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, but they elected you, so you're the one who has to be reasonable. Just how I think of it. Anyway, just fun stuff. Go ahead and did you want to add anything or?
No, not in particular. I think that kind of does it for student loans, except that if you are not one of the people who has gone on and taken care of that application, we would encourage you to do that right away, because the sooner you put in your application, the sooner your numbers will be pushed through. They made it sound like they have a lot of our data already, but I'm not going to hedge my bets on being one of them. I'm going to put in my application, and you should too.
Yeah, I went through it. It takes like 10 minutes. So you can go to fafsa.gov, and they have a link there. It's pretty easy to do. I'll go ahead and attach a link to this video. But yeah, get your stuff done, and please like and subscribe. And hey, comments. We like the comments. I really enjoy the hate comments. They're fun because at least, we get some feedback. I like the feedback.
All right.
I like
if you have a clip that you want us to take a look at,
you can email us.
You can email that to us, and we might talk about your clip.
Yeah, or if you have a financial situation or concern or issue you want to talk about, feel free to email us and we'll go through it. If we have time.
With that being said, we can be reached via email. You can also find me at my blog, mysensewithsense.com, where you can find information about courses. You can make comments, you can read pieces, and connect with us there as well.
All right, fantastic. And remember, like, subscribe, ring the bell, or don't like, whatever. Just subscribe and ring the bell, whatever. Either way.
Right.
All right.